Well, first of all, I want to thank you for joining us this morning, and I trust that you have enjoyed our time of worship so far, and that you are ready to hear God's word. Before, however, I look at our sermon for today and our topic for today, I really want to read a statement concerning the racial events and tension that we're feeling in our nation today. And so I have written this statement. I want to read it to you. And I've really written it because I trust that I don't say anything that is not true, and I don't want to say anything unintentionally that would be offensive to people. And so please listen as I read this statement. This has been a terrible week or so across our nation, not just because of the deaths and restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic, but because of the blatant injustice and racism evident in the murder of George Floyd and the events that followed. The whole issue of race and injustice is one of the most relevant and complicated issues we face as a nation and as a contemporary church. The topic is difficult to deal with for many reasons. One main reason, it is filled with pain for so many. It is not enough for us as Americans, and especially as Christians, to say we don't know what to say or do, so we say nothing and do nothing. Erring on the side of silence is not right. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said this: silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. We need to be defenders of the truth, of grace, and of justice. In speaking out, we should realize that there are good and godly policemen and women who are always trying to do their very best. We also realize that there are those who would use every opportunity to wreak havoc in our communities and destroy businesses and public property, many of which are minority-owned. These acts end up overshadowing the important issues that need to be addressed. I was reminded yesterday by my good friend, Dr. David Anderson, that we need to be gracists during these difficult days. Dr. Anderson has been here to preach and to teach about gracism. We have read his book and taught gracism here at the Gathering Place. Not being racist is not good enough. Not being racist is still neutral. Just like not being bad doesn't automatically make you good. We must do good to be good. We must be gracious. As I'm addressing the congregation, in essence, of the Gathering Place, a gathering place of all nations to live, love, and lead like the Lord Jesus Christ, my mind goes to the Holy Scriptures. And the Apostle Paul taught us that as believers in Jesus Christ, we are to seek to do good to one another and to everyone. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 15. To Titus, a leader, the Apostle Paul says this: the saying is trustworthy, and I want you to insist on these things, so that those who believe in God may be careful to devote themselves to good works. Notice the action words Paul uses and realize that he isn't even hinting at being silent and neutral on important topics and issues. The Apostle Paul concludes the letter to Titus by saying this, and let our people learn to devote themselves to good works, so as to help cases of urgent need and not be unfruitful. With this admonition in mind, to let our people learn to devote themselves to good works. In a week or so, we are going to focus our morning live stream program on the issue of race relations and justice. We will have expert guests to address key issues through great interviews. We will let you know more in the days to come. Tomorrow, Monday, I will lead our prayer time at 1 p.m., and we will focus our prayers on the healing of our nation. Today, however, let me say this. I grieve for those who have experienced such pain, unfair treatment, and injustice because of their race or ethnicity. To me, it needs to be a first step for leaders, churches, followers of Jesus Christ who want to be gracists in dealing with the turmoil and the tension in our nation. We are told in the book of Romans that we are to weep with those who weep. And we have minority brothers and sisters and family members in pain and fearful. We need to identify with their brokenness, the brokenness of their world, and the injustices they are experiencing right now. We might not totally understand their thoughts and feelings, but we should be asking God in prayer to bring healing to their broken hearts and asking God what we can do to bring comfort, care, and change. Let's not just be silent. May our minority brothers and sisters, our minority community here in the greater Syracuse area, see that we are gracists, and to me, right here and right now, being a gracist should be seen in our compassion. We are weeping and mourning with you. We love you, and we will stand with you to say, enough injustice, enough unfair treatment, enough pain and loss because of the color of your skin. We pray for justice and peace throughout our land. Join with me in prayer. Lord, as the lead pastor here at the Gathering Place, I just want to come before you on behalf of our church, our community, our nation. We're going through such difficult times. We see the turmoil and the tension. We recognize that we need to see justice and grace and truth, and so often we are not. I want to pray, Lord, that as a pastor and as other pastors and leaders in the Christian community, that you might touch our hearts and minds, that we might do good, that we might not just be silent. And may we, Lord, understand what the Apostle Paul was saying to Titus, a leader, that he needed to lead, that people would do good. And God, today I want to pray for a national spiritual awakening in our land. I pray, Lord, that those who are not believers in Jesus Christ would turn to him, because we know that he is the God of peace, the God of all comfort. And I pray, Lord, that we might, as a land, turn back to you, because we realize that only you can heal the brokenhearted. Only you can bring true, perfect peace to individuals and to our nation. And Lord, very specifically, I want to pray for racial reconciliation. I pray that God will heal our nation of racism, and that God will use the church to stand against racial conflict and violence and prejudice. I pray that the church would lead the way in racial reconciliation by modeling love and respect for every person, regardless of the color of their skin or their ethnic background. Lord, I pray for life to be valued and protected. I pray that that would be true of all stages of life, from the very beginning of conception to the time that you take us from this earth. I pray, Lord, for our local and our national government leaders. God, I pray that they would be peacemakers. I pray that you would give them guidance and direction and wisdom. I pray that they might truly fight for justice, for life being fair for all. And Lord, as I just conclude this prayer right now, I want to pray for all of our law enforcement officers. I pray that they would be good and godly people, and that as those good and godly law enforcement people are out there trying to protect us, God, I pray that you would protect them, that we might show those that are good and godly great respect and honor. God, I pray today that you might heal our nation. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, our topic today really, in a sense, relates to the issues that we are battling and dealing with as a nation. And so today we're talking about fighting fear in troubled times. It's a very important topic. It's an issue that we all deal with in one way or another. And so even in our area, today we found out early this morning that there is going to be starting tonight a curfew in Syracuse that will begin at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning. And I already know that there are people who are fearful of what might happen. I think of the times in which we live right now and how so many of my friends are concerned about their own sons, especially who are African American. They're concerned about their safety. As a grandfather of an African American young man, it's a personal issue. And I know that even late last night, as I heard on the news that there were riots in Los Angeles, close to where my grandson lives, I quickly checked to see how he was doing, what he was doing, whether he was safe. And then I think of churches, even in Minneapolis, and how some of the churches have reacted to some of the riots even in that area. And clearly I was blessed today as I heard early this morning a pastor and someone from his church interviewed. And they were asked, well, what have you been able to do in response to the riots? They didn't use the word gracism, but they, in essence, said this: when we woke up after the riots, we decided that as Christians, as a church, we needed to go downtown to where all of the riots took place and begin to clean up. And so they had pictures of members of that church who fought the fears to do what they believed God wanted them to do. And so there they were in these areas that were ravished by the riots, sweeping up the glass and cleaning up the area. That was a godly response. It didn't okay what the rioters were doing, but it was a godly response. It was a response that those individuals fought fear and were gracious. I hope that would be true of all of us. They were asked, what will you do tomorrow if tonight there's more riots? And they said this, we'll go back tomorrow and clean up again. And so we all fight fear. So today I want you to turn with me, if you have your Bibles, and these verses will be on the screens, but if you have your Bibles, I want to encourage you to turn to the Old Testament with me, to a psalm that you might be familiar with, Psalm 34. Psalm 34. Psalm 34, before we read, I'm going to begin reading in verse 4, but before we read it, let's realize that this is a psalm of David, and David is in trouble. David is dealing with troubling times. David is on the run because Saul is trying to get him and kill him. And so nothing in David's life seems to be going right. Old Testament scholars tell us that David wrote Psalm 34 not after he ended all of these troubles, but even before enduring. And that David most likely dealt with these troubles for some 10 years. And so that's amazing, especially at the end, we'll read the first 3 verses. But in the first 3 verses, David is in the midst of all of the difficulties and disappointments and disasters in his life, and he's praising God. He's a true follower of Jehovah. And so you need to realize that if you want to be rid of your fears that control you and hurt you, that really kind of the first step is this, that you need to put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. Because when you put your faith and trust in him, then the God of peace can give you peace. And here again, we see that peace is the opposite of being fearful, worrying all the time, and being anxious. And so circumstances didn't change in David's life, but he praises God in the midst of those troubles, not when it was over. So beginning in verse 4 through really verse 17 or 18, follow along as I read. David says this, I sought the Lord. That's what we were just talking about, that you need to know God if you want to be delivered from your fear. And David is saying this, I sought the Lord. So in the midst of my difficulties, I sought him. I went to him. I trusted him. And so here's what he says. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me from all my fears. Now, I want you to notice that he doesn't say this. I went to the Lord, and he answered me and got me out of all the trouble that I'm in. No, he's saying this, that even though the difficulties didn't change, God delivered me from my fears. Verse 5, those who look to him, meaning those who look to God, are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles. Notice not from. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. So not only is David talking about fear, he's talking in a negative sense, but he's then talking about fear in a positive sense. And he tells us that the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. Verse 8, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. So again, let me remind you, don't get tired of me reminding you of this, that here David is still in the midst of all of the trouble, that he's experiencing. But he tells us, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in him. Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints. For those who fear him have no lack." In other words, those who fear God, God will bless. We'll take a look at that in a little different way in just a moment. Verse 10, "The young lions suffer want and hunger, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing." Verse 11, "Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord." And so here David is, in essence, telling all of us that we need to be teaching those that are under us, those that are our children, that we need to be teaching them to fear the Lord. "What man is there who desires life and loves many days that he may see good?" Well, all of us, I hope. "Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good." We talked about that this morning. "Seek peace and pursue it." Verse 15, "The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous." The righteous are those who fear him. "And his ears toward their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the memory of them from the earth." Verse 17, "When the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all." What great words. Let's think for a few moments this morning about this issue of fear. And the first aspect of it that I want you to think about is this, that there's a healthy aspect to fear. All fear is not wrong. All fear is not a sin. And so there's a positive side to fear, a beneficial side to fear, a valuable aspect of fear itself. And so everyone fears something. And often our fears are grounded in pain, grounded in real danger and reality. They're not always something that is just in our head. David's a great example of that in Psalm 34, because as David's talking about fear, let's realize that he's not out of touch with reality. He's in touch with reality, and he knows that he's running for his life and that he's fearful. But God will help him to deal with that fear. And so there's a healthy issue here. Fear can save a life, or it can ruin a life. When we think about fear, I think about the positive part in this way, that if we can view it as a God-implanted survival factor that he's given to us to deal with dangerous, sinful situations here on this earth. And so the fear of danger and pain is quite normal and natural. And so fear activates us, us physically, to do things to in essence save us from that which is threatening. It prepares us for emergencies so that we become quicker and physically stronger than we normally would be. And so there's this positive side, but there's also a positive side spiritually to fear. We've talked about that. Just run through this briefly this morning. First of all, we're commanded to fear God. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 17 deals with this, and there are so many other verses as well, but here we're told that we're to fear God. And what is that fear? It's not a fear that causes us to run away from God. It's a fear that causes us to adore him and reverence him and realize how great he is and run to him. And so I always think of it this way, that when we fear God, we take God seriously. Those of you who never knew my dad, my dad was a big man. He was about 6'3" and extremely strong. And one time I said something I never should have said to my mom, and I was already, I think, a senior in high school. And my dad just gently came over to me. I say gently came over, but once he got to me, he grabbed my shirt, and with one arm, he lifted me off the ground and gave me a lecture about treating my mom correctly and with respect. Now, I'll tell you, when your feet are dangling, not hitting the ground, you pay attention. Now, was I afraid of my dad? Yes, in this sense. I took him seriously. And we need to take God seriously. And so it is a command. The whole duty of man, we're told in the book of Ecclesiastes in chapter 12, the whole duty of man is to fear God and to keep his commandments. We're to realize that fear and blessing go hand in hand. Psalm 34, verse 7, we read, "Blessed is the man who fears the Lord." And when we fear the Lord, we lack in nothing in essence. And so you and I'm sure, would agree that, we need more of a healthy fear of God today in our world. Martin Luther said, "I more fear what is within me than what comes from without." What he really was focused on was this, that when we fear God, we obey God, we take his commandments seriously, and we're fearful, in a sense, of not doing that which hurts God. Well, fear and a healthy church go hand in hand. Acts chapter 9 and verse 31 says this, "Then the church enjoyed a time of peace. It was strengthened, encouraged by the Holy Spirit. It grew in numbers." And here's what it says, "living in the fear of the Lord." Fear of God does away with other fears. We're told that when we fear God, we don't need to fear man. And so the fear of self, the fear of harm and all goes away when we truly are focused on God and fear him. And I think it's also a healthy thing to have a healthy fear anyway of judgment, because we're told in 1 Corinthians, or 2 Corinthians rather, chapter 7, verse 1, "Therefore, dear friends, since we have such great promises, we should wash ourselves clean from the impurity of the flesh and the spirit, making sanctification complete in the fear of God." Well, there's also, and this is what we're mainly concerned about when we think about fear, there's a harmful aspect of fear. Well, what is that harmful aspect? Well, the harmful aspect of fear began in the book of Genesis with sin. And so what happened then in Genesis after Adam and Eve sinned, they went and hid themselves. And so there is a destructive kind of fear that we should be concerned about. And that destructive fear is when fear controls us and drives us and changes us and cripples our productivity and our relationship, when it, in essence, prohibits personal and spiritual growth, and it makes life itself just a chore. And so it gets us to avoid good things. It zaps us of joy and energy for life itself. It hinders us from realizing our dreams and our goals when it brings this self-destructive kind of behavior. We realize that it's wrong. Well, the scripture, again, talks about a lot of destructive fears. Let me just mention a few of them. First of all, is the fear of death. Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 15 tells us that, "And free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death." We find that fear of not being cared for is a destructive fear. Luke chapter 12 and verse 32, the Lord himself tells us, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom." He tells us in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 26, God even knows when a sparrow falls from the sky, how much more does he care for you? There's the fear of man. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 6. The Lord is my helper. I will not fear what man can do to me. I think we all in some way deal with that fear of man. The fear of man can be seen in so many different ways. Where there's the fear of losing people's favor. There's the fear of not being loved by people. The fear that nothing good, they're not going to do anything good for us. The fear of losing friendship. The fear of failure even. I think all is based on this fear of man. The fear of not measuring up to other people's standards. Well, another destructive fear is the fear of suffering itself. Revelation chapter 2 and verse 10, do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. And the fear of judgment, the unhealthy side of this concern. We fear God's punitive wrath, God's rejection and punishment. And what do we need? Well, we need the assurance of our salvation in Jesus Christ. Salvation rests upon the work of Christ alone, which we appropriate or embrace by genuine faith. We can lose our assurance, but we never lose our salvation. And so we need to realize that we are secure in God. Now, concerning all of these destructive fears, you know what Jesus says over and over again? Be not afraid. Well, let's look briefly at the help aspect. What do we need to do to deal with fear in our lives? And there are 6 things that I want you to think about really briefly with me. And let me say again, just like I did last week with the issue of worry and anxiety, that fear, again, comes in different levels in our lives. For some, it's a lifelong battle. And others, it's an occasional issue that they have to deal with. It's a battle that can be won, however, and there is help available. And so there's good news. Psalm 34, verse 4, probably is the key verse here. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from all my fears. And so what should we do? Well, number 1, I put confession here. So what do I mean by confession? Well, we need to acknowledge God first and foremost. So when Isaiah tells us, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee, he's saying in essence that we need to focus on God first and foremost in regards to anything that we're dealing with. And so we're told then that we're to fear God. And we're to fear, that this fear of God will produce confidence and hope and trust in him. And so we need to acknowledge God. Secondly, second word that I think stands out to me is confrontation. We need to speak the truth in love. You know, if you look at 1 John and Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15, we quote it often about speaking the truth in love, and we need to speak the truth in love, but it also tells us that that's the key to growth. So we need to face our fears. We need to be honest with ourselves and with God. Honesty is the prelude to growth. So we need to admit our fears, and it will lead then to us getting help. I'd encourage you that if you're dealing with fear, you want to really be honest, then maybe you need to tell a friend too. You need to get the help of friends that you know well and can trust. Well, number 3, the third word that jumps out to me is clarification. Clarification. We need to look for the source of our fear. It can be an object. It can be an experience or some event. It can be a person. It can be a way of life. And so we need to clarify it. We need to face it. We need to discuss it. We need to maybe gradually approach it in steps. But we're never going to really find deliverance if we hide it and if we don't try to understand what we truly are fearful of? Well, number 4 is the word connection. 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 7 tells us this, that love is the opposite of fear. And so God tells us that he hasn't given us the spirit of fear, but he has given us the spirit of love. Well, how does that fit into here? Well, you see, love is the opposite of fear. Fear can be very, very selfish. When we're fearful, that's all we want to think about is ourselves and our situations. And so fear focuses on our needs and no one else's needs. And so we need to force ourselves even to be loving and to do acts of kindness for other people. And of course, we probably should understand that when we're fearful and we need the help of other people, we need to accept that help. Oftentimes, we men especially kind of say, well, I'm a man, I shouldn't be afraid, and we never look to others to help us. And so the connection with other people is so very, very important. Well, number 5 is commitment. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean that we need to obey God. We need to act on his word and on his promises. Sometimes we need to expose ourselves to what we are frightened of. Short-term pain, however, can lead to long-term gain. And so what should we be concerned about? Well, there's 3 things I'll throw out here in regards to commitment. I think we really need to focus on God's perfect love. And so 1 John chapter 4 and verse 18 tells us that God is love. And we also know that there is no fear in love because perfect love drives out fear. He loves you. Focus on that and act on that. Secondly, we need to focus on God's power. God is bigger than any situation, any object, any person that we're frightened of. Psalm 27 verse 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? And so we need to remember, even last week, Philippians chapter 4 and verse 13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That means this today. I can face my fears not because I'm strong in and of myself, but because I understand that God is all powerful and God is there to strengthen me to do whatever he's asked me to do. Well, we need to focus on God's presence. We've already looked at Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 10, where we're told that we don't need to be afraid. Why? Well, God is with us. There's so many verses. Psalm 23 and verse 5. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? For thou art with me. This week I was reading in the book of Acts. I just want to read a couple verses to you. Acts chapter 18. Paul is at the city of Corinth, and the Lord talks to Paul in a vision. And so in Acts chapter 18, verse 9 and 10, let me just read this. Do not be afraid, but go on speaking and do not be silent. Wow, what we've talked about already today. For I am with you, and no one will attack you to harm you, for I have many in this city who are my people. So apparently Paul was somewhat afraid, but after this, he went and spoke the words that God wanted him to speak. And so we need to focus on God's presence, but also on his promise. We need to trust him. He is faithful, the scriptures tell us, who promised. And so we need to mark it that he's faithful. Don't doubt God's love and God's care. Now, to close, the last word, celebrate. Celebration. You should know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And when the truth sets you free, celebrate. Celebrate good times. Now, I think it's interesting that David was so in touch with God and so trusting of God. Here's how David begins this psalm in which he talks about how God delivered him from his fear. I want to read how David celebrated even before he was physically delivered, but he trusted God. Here's what he says: I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name forever. Why? Because he can deliver us from all our fears. Let's pray.